I don't even remember what I was searching for that night, probably something stupid, maybe a rabbit hole about liminal spaces or that creepy analog horror series my coworker kept nagging me to watch, but that doesn't matter now. What matters is what showed up on my recommended feed. Tucked between a couple of conspiracy theory thumbnails and an oddly satisfying hydraulic press video, there it was, a blurry, grainy still of a man in a black hoodie stepping into an apartment building. My apartment building. That alone should have been weird enough to set off warning bells, but what made me freeze, what made my fingers actually twitch above the trackpad like they didn't want to obey me, was that the figure in the thumbnail was me. Same jeans. Same hoodie. Same backpack slung over my left shoulder with the broken zipper I'd meant to fix for weeks. The title of the video was even stranger, no title at all, just a random string of numbers, like a timestamp or a file ID. I hovered for a second. You know how YouTube autoplays a short preview when you pause? Yeah. I saw myself, no doubt about it, reaching into my pocket, grabbing my keys, and pushing open the main door of my building. No intro. No music. No commentary. Just raw, silent footage of a moment I lived, but had never recorded. At first, I thought maybe it was some weird prank or a glitch, maybe AI was generating lookalike deepfake content or something. But my gut wouldn't let it go. I clicked. The screen filled with darkness and then light as the camera adjusted focus. The angle was slightly elevated, like from across the street or maybe the window of a parked car. There I was, plain as day, trudging up the concrete steps to my building entrance, pausing to rub my eyes like I always do when I've been staring at a screen for too long. I could hear the soft ambient sounds of passing traffic, muffled like it was recorded behind a dirty windshield. I recognized the moment, it was from 3 days ago, maybe 4. I remembered being alone that night, wrapped in the comforting numbness of routine. I paused the video and rewound it slowly. Frame by frame. There was no one else in the shot. No camera in sight. No reflection. Just me, and whoever, or whatever, was watching. My throat went dry, and an electric pulse shot through my chest like my body was trying to warn me before my brain could catch up. I sat motionless for maybe a minute, maybe more, just listening to the quiet hum of my laptop fan. It was the only thing grounding me to reality as my heart pounded in my ears like war drums. I wasn't scared yet. Not exactly. I was disoriented. But that was about to change. Driven by a mix of dread and impossible curiosity, I clicked the uploader's channel name, expecting a dead link, a troll page, or some edgy ARG with a Reddit trail behind it. What I found was worse, infinitely worse. The channel opened, and my blood turned to ice. No logo. No banner. No subscriber count. Just videos. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Every single one titled with a string of numbers and dashes, and every single one had my face in the thumbnail. Me standing at a grocery store checkout. Me pacing on a phone call in my bedroom. Me lying half asleep on my couch, hand down the side of the cushion looking for the damn remote. Footage I never took. Footage no one could have taken, not unless they were inside my life in a way that made my skin crawl just thinking about it. My mouth opened to speak, but there was no one to hear. The only sound was the soft click of my mouse as I played the next video. Then another. Then another. I watched myself living my life in surveillance, unfiltered, unedited, unwanted. The timestamp on the most recent video made my vision blur. It had been uploaded just 43 minutes ago. And the title? 2024-12-03_23:12:44. I looked at the bottom corner of my screen. It was 11:56 p.m. The next upload was coming soon. The moment I opened the uploader's channel, it felt like I'd stepped off a ledge into some invisible abyss, and I was falling faster with every scroll. There were no thumbnails with clickbait faces or colorful titles, no hashtags, tags, or even descriptions, just lines of silent, coded videos, each one colder and more clinical than the last. The timestamps went back months. Then years. The realization didn't hit all at once. It was like drowning in stages, where your brain still refuses to accept the lungs filling with water. I clicked on a random video near the middle of the list, something from March. In it, I saw myself walking through a grocery store, stopping in front of the pasta aisle, scratching my neck like I always do when I'm anxious. It was quiet, the audio muffled, but clear enough to make out the squeaking of my shoes on the floor tiles. There were no other customers in sight, just me, caught from an aisle over, the camera peeking out from what looked like behind a shelf. I watched myself fumble with a jar of marinara sauce, drop it, and swear under my breath. It felt like I was watching a stranger, someone I knew intimately, someone I was, and yet seeing him like this, so exposed, was horrifying. Not because of what I was doing, but because of how ordinary it all was. Someone had watched me in my quietest, dullest moments, and thought them worth archiving. That scared me more than anything. One video showed me on my balcony at night, smoking, something I haven't done in months, something I'd only done in a moment of desperation and guilt. The angle came from above, like someone had been filming me from the rooftop of the building across the street. Another video, even older, showed me at a bus stop, earbuds in, bobbing my head slightly to music only I could hear. That footage was zoomed in from across the road, and in one nauseating frame, I saw myself yawn and blink. I don't know why that part rattled me the most, maybe it was because I didn't remember doing it, or because it looked like someone had watched me for so long that even the most involuntary, forgettable things were now documented somewhere on the internet. I started clicking more, faster now, frantically, as if searching for some clue or explanation among the sea of mundane. I was looking for a crack in the pattern, something that would scream, "It's fake," or "You're being pranked." But instead, I found myself deeper in the rabbit hole. Every clip was real. Every moment authentic. Every minute of my life suddenly felt staged and hollow, like I was some character in a show I never agreed to be in. Then I made the mistake of checking the upload dates. Most were backdated, hours after the recordings took place, but the last few were more recent. Much more recent. The newest video, just uploaded 20 minutes ago, was titled 2024-12-03_23:37:11. The blood drained from my face as I clicked it. It was me again, inside my apartment, sitting at my desk, head tilted down, fingers frozen on the mouse pad. I watched myself reach for my water bottle and take a sip, just like I had moments ago. Same clothes. Same posture. Same tired slump in my shoulders. But I hadn't filmed that. No one had. No one could have. The only window was behind me, the blinds closed tight. The camera angle was from above and to the right, a position that would only be possible if someone was physically inside my apartment, somewhere higher than my bookshelves. I paused the video and slowly turned my head toward the corner of the ceiling. Nothing. Just a white patch of drywall and a slow, creeping feeling crawling under my skin like cold fingers. I was about to shut my laptop when a sudden ping froze me in place. A new video had gone up. The title? 2024-12-03_23:47:02. I looked at the clock. It was 11:47 p.m. The video hadn't been uploaded after the event, it was being recorded in real time. I didn't even want to click it. But my hand moved on its own. My own terrified face stared back at me, not yesterday, not hours ago. Right now. I slammed the laptop shut so violently that I almost knocked it off the desk, and for a few seconds, I just sat there, hunched in the dark, surrounded by the silence of my apartment, listening to the violent thud of my own heartbeat hammering against my ribs like it was trying to break out. The room felt smaller now, tighter, like the walls were inching closer every time I blinked, and every shadow seemed to ripple with the potential of something just out of view. I couldn't sit still, the air had become heavy, thick like it was filled with static, and I got up without even thinking, pacing, breathing through clenched teeth, scanning every corner of my space as if my body knew before my mind did that something was very, very wrong. The video I had just seen was not an upload of what I had done earlier. It was now. It was live. I had watched myself from a third-person perspective as I watched the video of myself, and in that endless reflection, I realized something truly nightmarish. I wasn't just being observed. I was being anticipated. I started ripping apart my apartment like a madman, and maybe I was one at this point, or maybe this was the only rational response to discovering that your privacy, your autonomy, and possibly your entire identity has been compromised by an unknown, invisible presence. I tore open drawers, reached behind bookshelves, dumped my laundry basket, overturned my mattress, yanked cords from the wall. I even took a screwdriver and pried open the smoke detector above my bed, but all I found inside was dust and a dying battery. I unscrewed the cover to the wall vent, expecting to find a hidden lens, a blinking red light, something to point at and scream, "There." That's how they did it. But there was nothing, only darkness and the faint smell of metal and mildew. I disconnected my router, covered the webcam with masking tape, threw a towel over the smart TV, turned off the lights, closed the blinds, and still I didn't feel safe. I had never been the type of person to believe in surveillance conspiracies or hidden government bugs or shadowy tech corporations harvesting data through my toaster, but that night I became a believer. Or maybe I became the proof. I had just collapsed onto my couch, body trembling, sweat slicking my skin beneath my shirt, when the notification came. I hadn't thought to turn off my phone, it sat on the coffee table, face up, mocking me with the soft chime of a new alert. My stomach flipped before I even looked, because I knew exactly what it was, and I wasn't wrong. A new video had been uploaded. The title was 2024-12-03_23:56:21. I checked the time. 11:56 p.m. I stared at the thumbnail without blinking, because there I was again, hunched over on the couch, eyes hollow, wrapped in the low light of the lamp behind me. It was a freeze frame of what I was doing right now. I hadn't moved. I looked over my shoulder toward the far corner of the room where the camera angle must have been positioned. There was nothing there, no reflection, no blinking light, just empty air, and yet the sense of being watched, of being catalogued, of being studied, dug into my bones like glass. I didn't want to watch that video. I didn't want to know what happened next. But I also couldn't not. My hand reached for the phone slowly, like it belonged to someone else. My thumb hovered over the play button. And then, in the still silence of the room, the laptop behind me clicked. The screen flickered back to life on its own, and for just a second, the speakers whispered something I'll never forget, "Don't look away." By the time the first gray light of morning seeped through the edges of the blinds, I hadn't slept a second, and I no longer recognized the face in the mirror. There was a shadow under my left eye so dark it looked bruised, my skin pale like wax, and my fingers trembled with every small movement, twitching as if something were still crawling just beneath the surface of my nerves. I didn't eat. I didn't speak. I didn't move from my apartment, but I couldn't stay still either. Every creak in the floorboards, every gust of wind brushing the glass, every electronic hum felt like a threat, like proof that something else was here, something that was not supposed to exist within the walls of a one-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of an otherwise empty hallway. At 9:13 a.m. exactly, I called the only person I trusted not to call the cops on me for sounding insane. Jen. I didn't tell her what was wrong over the phone. I just said, "I need you. Please. Come over." And I must have sounded bad enough, desperate enough, unhinged enough, that she didn't argue. 15 minutes later, I buzzed her in, and I swear the moment she stepped into the apartment, the air shifted, not like relief, but like the predator hiding in the darkness had gone perfectly still. I didn't even try to explain it to her at first, not with words. I just handed her my laptop and clicked play on one of the videos. It was from 2 days ago. Me and Jen at that cafe on 6th Street, the one we always went to after work when we were too tired to cook and too stubborn to admit we needed each other's company. She watched in silence, arms crossed, lips slowly parting as she realized the footage was real. She remembered that day. She remembered that conversation. And she remembered that we were alone, completely and absolutely, or at least we had believed we were. Her expression morphed from skepticism to disbelief to unease. Then she looked at me like I had dragged her into something dangerous, something contagious, and I didn't blame her. We watched more videos together, some of them intimate in ways I hadn't been ready to share. Jen saw things I didn't want her to see, me sobbing alone in the kitchen with the fridge door open, me muttering to myself in the mirror like a lunatic, me staring blankly into the void of the TV long after it had turned off. She didn't laugh. She didn't speak. But she stayed. And that was enough to keep me from shattering completely. For now. We turned off every light in the apartment, blocked every window with towels and cardboard and trash bags, and scanned every square inch of the place for anything suspicious, any crack in the wall, any blinking light, any out-of-place item that could be watching. We found nothing. No hidden cameras. No microphones. No wires. But still, the feeling remained, that charged stillness, like something was waiting. It was just after noon when Jen pointed at the smoke detector in the far corner above the bookshelf. "What's that light?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I climbed up, heart pounding, and yanked the cover off. It was just the LED, the same one that had been blinking every minute for years, but that didn't make it any less terrifying now. It was like the house had grown eyes overnight. As we stood there, catching our breath, my laptop, which we had both forgotten to unplug, chimed again. Another upload. Another title with today's date. But this one was different. This one didn't have a timestamp. It had a name, Look Up. The thumbnail showed Jen and me, standing in the living room, flashlights pointed upward, just like we were doing right now. But the camera angle was impossible. It was looking down at us from above. Jen and I locked eyes, slowly turning our heads toward the ceiling vent over our heads. And in that moment, time seemed to stop. Because if the video was real, then something had filmed us from inside my ceiling, while we were still searching for it. When the flashlight beam hit the ceiling vent and dust fluttered down like ash, I felt something in me crack, not loudly, not dramatically, but the way ice spiderwebs across a frozen lake right before it gives way. Jen didn't say a word, but I could feel the panic radiating from her in waves. I stood there on the chair, staring into that black square above us, feeling the cold breath of something not human exhale from the dark. I reached for it, and she grabbed my wrist, whispering, "Don't." Her voice didn't sound like her voice. I think it was because for the first time since we met, she was scared, really scared, and I think seeing her break made me realize how much we had already lost control. That's when we made the decision. We were done playing detectives in a haunted apartment. No more clicking. No more staring. No more pretending we had time. We packed whatever we could reach without crossing a room alone. No more than 5 minutes later, we were in the car. Jen drove. I stared out the window like the shadows between the streetlights were alive, like something was following, even though I knew, deep down, it didn't need to follow me. It was already ahead. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and dust, and I already knew before we walked in that they wouldn't believe us. Still, I sat in that beige plastic chair, clutching my laptop to my chest like it was cursed, and when the officer called my name, I stood up and tried to sound sane. I told him there was a YouTube channel uploading videos of me that I never recorded, some of them taken inside my apartment, while I was in it. I told him there were hundreds, maybe thousands of them. He blinked at me like I just told him my toaster was reading my thoughts. Jen backed me up, even pulled out her phone and showed a still frame from the Look Up video, but the moment I opened the channel on my laptop, my blood went cold. The videos were gone. Every single one. The homepage said, "This channel has no content." I refreshed. I retyped the URL. Nothing. Like it had never existed. The officer's face twisted into that practiced expression of polite skepticism, the one you wear for people you think might be having a mental health episode. He suggested maybe we take a break from screens and contact someone if things get worse. I wanted to scream. Jen clenched her jaw so hard I thought her teeth would snap. The only thing they offered us was a patrol car to drive by my building tonight, just in case. Just in case what, exactly? Back at the apartment, the silence was different. It wasn't heavy like before, it was curious. Watching. Smiling, maybe. We kept the lights off. We didn't speak. Jen curled up on the couch, blanket around her, clutching a crowbar she found under my sink. I sat cross-legged on the floor like a child waiting for punishment, laptop open, eyes fixed on the blank YouTube channel, refreshing every few seconds like an addict. Then it happened. My inbox pinged, not from YouTube, not from any address I recognized, no subject, no sender, just a single message with a link. I knew what it was before I even clicked. The channel was back. The videos were back. But they weren't the same. Some were older. Some I hadn't seen. Some of them weren't even in my apartment anymore. There was one from a parking garage. One from a bathroom stall. One from a crowded metro car. And then a new video appeared right at the top, still uploading in real time. The thumbnail showed Jen and me huddled together, exactly as we were at that moment. But it wasn't from a corner or a vent, it was right above our heads. And then, for the first time, a voice came through the speakers. Distorted. Hollow. Male, maybe. One word, closer. I didn't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up, not from a dream, but from a nightmare that never ended, one where the nightmare followed me into the daylight and whispered in my ear with the same breathless tone that the voice from the speakers used, calm, low, like it didn't need to raise its volume because it already knew I was listening. Jen was still asleep on the couch when I powered the laptop back on, hands shaking, mouth dry, heart pounding not with adrenaline anymore, but with dread that had matured into something colder, more permanent, the kind of fear that doesn't scream anymore, it just waits. The channel was still there, still live, but I didn't click on the latest video. I scrolled down instead, farther than I ever had before, through endless thumbnails of myself, eating, driving, brushing my teeth, talking to strangers, crying in private, each video named with those familiar timestamps that made my skin crawl like they had been carved into my memory long ago and I just hadn't noticed. I kept scrolling. Further. Past last year. Past 2022. Past the pandemic. Past the job I got fired from. Past the breakup. Past college. Past high school. At some point, it stopped feeling like I was browsing a channel and more like I was reading my own diary, one I didn't write but someone else had kept, obsessively, methodically, like a collector cataloging his prized possession. I clicked on a video from 2014, it showed me in my first apartment, sitting on the floor, drinking from a plastic bottle of cheap vodka, sobbing and whispering to no one. I didn't know anyone had seen that night. I had never told anyone about it. But here it was, in full HD. My breakdown. My shame. Someone had been there. Watching. Recording. Immortalizing. I clicked another, my grandmother's funeral, me kneeling at her grave long after everyone had left. The camera angle was from behind a tree. The silence in the video wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. Like the person behind the lens wanted me to feel that I had never been alone. And somehow, it worked. My mouth went dry when I reached the bottom of the page. The oldest video on the channel didn't have a date. It just said, first. The thumbnail was blurry and pale. A hospital room. A baby wrapped in white. My thumb hovered over the play button like it was a trigger. I clicked it. The footage was grainy, shaky, as if taken on some old handheld camera. Nurses walked by, voices muffled, but the lens stayed fixed on a small bassinet in the corner of the room. Inside was a baby, barely minutes old, red-faced, crying, flailing its limbs, and on the left thigh, just visible under the tag, a birthmark in the shape of a crooked crescent. My birthmark. I gripped the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles went white. Someone had been watching me since I was born. Before the internet. Before smartphones. Before YouTube even existed. I don't know how long I stared at the screen before I noticed the last second of the video. The lens shifted, just slightly, and caught the reflection of the person holding the camera in the chrome edge of a medical tray. A man. No face visible. Just the outline. Just the shadow. Watching. Always watching. The video ended, and the screen faded to black, but I kept staring, because I knew something had just changed. Not in the video. In me. After watching the video labeled "First," something inside me broke in a way I didn't think was possible, not like a snapped bone, clean and defined, but like glass splintering in slow motion, each crack crawling through the edges of what I thought was true until the whole thing threatened to collapse. I sat in front of the dark screen, hands cold, staring into my reflection, but for the first time in my life I felt like the reflection wasn't mine, like someone else was looking back at me through my own face, someone older, quieter, watching with the patience of someone who had been there since the very beginning. When Jen woke up, her voice cracked with sleep and concern, and all I could say was, "They've been watching me since I was a baby." She didn't laugh. She didn't ask if I was sure. She just knelt beside me and whispered, "We have to go." The fear in her voice didn't sound like fear of the unknown anymore, it sounded like she believed me, and somehow that made it so much worse. We packed quickly, stuffing the laptop, a few clothes, and our chargers into a backpack, and we drove to the nearest cafe with a crowd, where we could disappear for a while under fluorescent lights and background music. But even there, I felt eyes. I sat in the back corner booth, back to the wall, scanning every patron, every camera mounted in the ceiling, every phone screen. Every single face was a potential threat, every smiling stranger a possible silent cameraman. Jen tried to calm me down, told me I looked like I was about to pass out, but the paranoia had hollowed out something inside me. I turned my phone on, just for a second, just to see if there were any updates. And there it was, a push notification, even though I'd turned them off the day before. Now playing, coffee break. I didn't want to click it, but my fingers moved without me. The video opened. The footage was grainy, like always, and it showed Jen and me, right now, sitting in the booth, exactly as we were. The camera angle was high, like from one of the corner security cameras, but angled just enough that I could see the coffee stain on my sleeve and the crack in the corner of her phone case. And then I noticed something else, something wrong. In the video, Jen was slowly edging away from me, eyes wide, lips trembling, like she was afraid of me. In real life, she was just sipping her coffee, but in the video, she pushed back from the booth, looked around, and then stood up and walked out, leaving me alone, confused, desperate. I blinked and looked up, but she was still there in front of me. "Do you see this?" I whispered, showing her the video. But she just frowned. "It's not loading," she said. On her phone, the video wouldn't open. On mine, it played smoothly. I watched myself stand up, panic in my eyes, and run out the door, and just as I did, a black van pulled up on the curb and the screen went dark. I looked out the window. There was no van. Not yet. But the timestamp was 5 minutes from now. Jen touched my hand and said something, but I couldn't hear it over the sound of blood rushing in my ears. If the video was right, something was about to happen, and the worst part. I didn't know if I was watching the future, or if I had already lived it and just hadn't realized. I stood up without a word and walked out of the cafe, heart pounding, lungs aching for air. The sky outside looked exactly like the video, dull, overcast, a breeze picking up. And then I heard tires screeching just around the corner. A shadow moved on the pavement. I didn't wait. I ran. And the video kept playing. I woke up to the sound of humming, not a voice, not music, but the soft electrical hum of machines, the kind that rattles in the back of your teeth and doesn't stop, even when you beg it to. My wrists were numb, stiff from being zip-tied to the arms of a metal chair that creaked every time I breathed too hard, and the room I found myself in was dim, industrial, and ice-cold, lit only by the flickering glow of multiple TV monitors mounted across the wall like some kind of twisted surveillance cathedral. I couldn't speak at first, my throat was too dry, my chest too tight, but my eyes moved freely, darting across the screens, and what I saw made my stomach lurch. Each monitor displayed a different moment of my life, captured from angles I'd never seen: a sleepover when I was 7, a birthday dinner with Jen at some rooftop restaurant last spring, a night 2 weeks ago when I cried alone in the shower. There was no pattern, no order, just decades of footage strung together like someone had recorded the entire existence of me and was now replaying it for fun. Then I heard footsteps, soft, deliberate, unnervingly slow, and I turned just in time to see a figure step out of the shadows behind me. He was tall, dressed in black from head to toe, and his face was hidden beneath a smooth white mask, the kind you'd expect to see in an art exhibit or a nightmare. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel them burning into me. When he spoke, the voice didn't come from his mouth, it came from the speakers overhead, processed, robotic, but still somehow familiar, like I'd heard it before but couldn't place when or where. "Welcome home," it said. "Star of the show." The man walked over to the largest screen, touched a button on a remote, and brought up a new video, one I hadn't seen before. The title was simple: The Truth. He clicked play. What followed wasn't a single clip, but a montage, a reel of my life, but in each scene, there was something new. A second figure. A shadow. A shape standing just outside the frame. Always there, always watching. Behind the trees. In the mirrors. Reflected in windows. At first, I thought it was a trick, some editing glitch, something AI generated to screw with my mind, but the longer I watched, the more I knew it was real. He had always been there. Then came the final clip, the first one ever made. The hospital. The crying baby. Me. But this time, the video didn't end when the nurse took me away. The camera panned down, slowly, revealing the figure holding it, a man in hospital scrubs, his face partially obscured, but just before the footage cut, he turned to the tray beside him, and his reflection flickered in the metal. The image was grainy, distorted, but there was something horribly wrong about it. Because the man in the reflection looked like me. Not exactly, not completely, but close enough that my body recoiled on instinct. A scar above the right eyebrow. A birthmark below the jaw. My voice caught in my throat as the masked figure reached up with one hand and began to remove the mask. Inch by inch, it peeled away from his face, and in those few agonizing seconds before it hit the floor, I already knew what I would see, and still, it wasn't enough to prepare me. I was looking at my own face. Not a doppelganger. Not a twin. Not a deepfake. It was me. Older. Colder. Sharper. "I've waited a long time to meet you," he said, with my own voice, my own smile, but none of my soul. There's something fundamentally shattering about seeing your own face, not in a mirror, not in a screen, but in the flesh, alive, breathing, moving independently, wearing your features like a mask it earned. I didn't speak at first. I couldn't. I just stared at him, at myself, or whatever version of me this was, some older, fractured version, as if time had warped around a singular identity and produced a second one from the same source, but twisted. His face was leaner than mine, expression sharper, his eyes colder and void of any flicker of empathy. The scar above his brow hadn't come from an accident, I remembered. The birthmark on his jawline was darker than mine. But the smile he wore, that was undeniably mine. And when he spoke again, my skin crawled because it was my voice, but stripped of warmth. "I've lived in the dark," he said. "I watched you live my life while I was buried in shadows. And now, finally, I get to finish what I started." He began circling me, slowly, like a predator savoring the end of the chase. "You had everything handed to you. Friends. Freedom. Love. You didn't even appreciate it. But I was there for all of it. Every moment. Every failure. Every lie. And now, it's my turn." I started screaming, not out of fear, but out of rejection, desperation, denial. I told him he was insane. That he wasn't me. That none of this made sense. But he didn't react like a villain from a movie. He didn't monologue or gloat. He simply played another video. This one wasn't from my childhood or teenage years. It was recent. The date was from last week. And it showed me sitting at my desk, typing, eyes glazed over, lips moving as if whispering to myself. But there was something wrong. I wasn't alone in the room. In the far left of the frame, just barely visible behind the cracked door, he stood there, watching me, smiling. I don't know how long he had been slipping into my world without me noticing, but he had. The timeline of my life wasn't just corrupted, it had been shared. The videos weren't surveillance. They were a record. And he had always been a part of it. "You see," he said, crouching down in front of me so that our faces were level, "we've always been one story. But every story needs an ending." He stood and clicked a remote. The lights dimmed, and a final screen lit up. A new video was being recorded. I could see the live feed, and it showed the room from above, me, zip-tied to the chair, and him, standing behind me. The title of the video read, "Finale, Live." Viewers were already piling in. Thousands. Comments scrolling like wildfire. Emojis, usernames, hearts, fire emojis, laughing skulls. A performance. A public execution. "You're not the only one who matters," he whispered. "They've been watching you. But they've been waiting for me." He pulled a long, thin blade from beneath the desk, polished and glinting under the monitor's light. "Only one of us leaves this room. Only one of us gets to live on in the story." And as he stepped behind me and pressed the edge of the knife to my throat, the comments flooded the screen with a single word over and over again, typed by people who didn't even know they were helping him finish it. "Do it." The blade bit shallow into my neck, not enough to kill, but enough to remind me I was real, alive, and at the mercy of someone who wore my face but had none of my hesitation. Blood slid down my collarbone, warm and terrifyingly grounding, and all I could think in that moment, beyond the dizzying rush of fear, humiliation, and complete helplessness, was that I was going to die for an audience. The comment stream was still rushing up the monitor beside me, reacting live, hundreds of thousands of people watching as one version of me prepared to erase the other, and none of them questioned whether what they were seeing was real. They joked. They begged. They applauded. This wasn't horror to them. This was content. "Let's give them what they came for," my double whispered into my ear, his voice soft, reverent, almost affectionate, like he was about to tuck me into bed rather than murder me live on a streaming platform that shouldn't have been able to carry this kind of darkness. But before he could move, I did what fear had frozen in me for too long, I fought back. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just twisted my body with every ounce of force I had left, throwing my full weight to one side, knocking the chair onto the floor with a deafening crash that shattered the moment like glass. My shoulder exploded in pain as it hit the ground, but the fall loosened one of the zip ties just enough that I could rip my hand free. My double shouted something, maybe a curse, maybe my name, but I didn't care anymore. This wasn't about understanding. This was about surviving. I rolled, kicked at his legs, and reached for the nearest object, a thick metal pole supporting one of the cameras, and swung blindly. The crack of bone was immediate and sickening. He stumbled, dropped the knife, and we both scrambled for it, hands slapping against the concrete. I got there first. The moment our eyes met across that single shining blade, I knew one of us wasn't leaving. He lunged. I swung. The blade caught him across the shoulder, then deeper, chest, neck, I don't remember, it was all movement and screaming and noise. When it was over, he was on the floor, gasping, smiling with blood in his teeth. Now they'll never know which of us lived, he said, choking on his own laugh. And neither will you. The door burst open behind me, a rush of heavy boots, shouts, Jen's voice cutting through the madness, and I collapsed into her arms, shaking, bloodied, silent. The police took me away, asked questions I couldn't answer, examined a facility filled with a lifetime of videos, an underground lair built to archive me. But they didn't find the stream. They didn't find the channel. The equipment? Wiped clean. No footage. No backups. No proof. For a while, I thought it was over. I moved across the country, changed my name, stopped using the internet. But then, weeks later, I got an email. No sender. No subject. Just a link. My hand trembled as I clicked. The video loaded. It was called, New Life Begins. The thumbnail showed me, here, now, in my new home, sitting on the couch, reading that very message. I froze. The camera panned slowly from behind my shoulder. The last thing I heard before the screen went black was a whisper I'll never forget, "You're still the star." And then, upload complete.